We're going to talk about using the current technologies, things like podcasting and video blogging and other social media, in order to tell better stories. How can we use these tools to pass on these stories, and in passing on these stories, pass on the patterns of uplift that Tom talks about that makes this world a better world. So, yeah, that's what I just said. And we also will talk about the Better World Network and what that is, and how you can create material and be a part of it. Best practices to your constituencies, the donors, the press, to those who are unwell connected. Tom talked about, could you find things that worked in one village in one part of South America and pass it on to another village in another part of South America. Assuming the language barriers could be overcome, stories of how problems were solved or how new things were learned are relevant. But how do we pass them on? How do we make them live and real? And how do we avoid all the technology hurdles? I mean, we had to do 6 cable things here just so that I could plug my laptop into a TV set that was probably made this year. Imagine what it's like when you're trying to figure out how to get internet access to a small village in Peru. It's not always the easiest way to do it. Could you move that? There are some teachers who are really effective, and the ones who are really, really effective not only teach, but they tell stories. And they help people to make mistakes that they can then learn from. And that's one of the best ways of using storytelling.
Talk about, and then they say, someone else says, I'd like to tell you a story. The eyes will go to the person telling a story, because a story is interesting. A story can be fun. A story also has a start and usually an end. And people like that. As opposed to, let me tell you something, that's kind of vague and it has a ... So that's a critical point. And I do want to talk about this which you can be the media. We've talked a lot about YouTube today. We've talked about websites. There's podcasting where you can now say what you have to say and send an audio file. You can send it really easily. The tools are really simple, which we'll get into. But you can be the media. The separation between the individual and the media has really been all but washed away by this wonderful thing called the internet. Earlier, Ethan mentioned Katie Couric. You can be Katie Couric. Well, maybe not her per se, but you can be in front of a camera, or she does radio now too with CBS. You can do a report. You can say, hi, I'm Joe Blow here at the scene of. And you could be Joe Blow here in Chelsea, New York, discussing. And then you end it, I'm Joe Blow in Chelsea. You now are a member of the media. You now have credibility.
In mass media, TV, radio, newspapers, etc. And now we have newer media. We have the web, we have podcasts, YouTube, email. But person to person is typically the oldest way around, right? And storytelling is often person to person or person to small group, like we are doing right now. And, oh, look at that. Confounding technologies. So we want to be able to help you take the best elements of all those different things, person to person, mass media, personalized media, social media, media that can be shared, and figure out what the best elements are for your audience and make whatever kind of media you want to make and make that shareable. And I think another really relevant aspect of social media is not only is it shareable, but it's something that people can comment on, something that people can make connections to. They can talk about it. They can add to it. Maybe they can take it and piece it together and mash it up and make it something that they want themselves by taking some piece of your thing and some piece of somebody else's. So that's a really relevant portion of this. Media represents opportunity. I'm going to actually let you do this one because I know that you've had that too many times.
Okay. I also want to talk about the prior slide said there's, what did it say? I'm sorry. Best elements may change depending on your audience. This means you can use a lot of different vehicles, a lot of different methods, and don't be reluctant to ask for help, because if you've got a message and someone hears it, they may want to help you spread your message. Okay, proper use of media allows expression of the message to many. When I tell, Howard is a friend of mine. Howard and I sometimes have driven in or driven home together. I'll tell Howard something. I know that when Howard and Annette drove up to Tom's last meeting, they made a podcast. That was just a discussion, right? But it's a discussion that anyone can now tune into, so it's to the many. And it really is very different because you can capture what you say and get the word out to the many. There also can be many constituencies. You'd be amazed how you were talking to the embroiderers, but a member of the embroiderers also is part of the Saskatchewan hockey puck collecting group. And all of a sudden, a bunch of Canadians are now really into this, and they tell other people. It's viral, but there's lots of constituencies, and you shouldn't lose sight of that. And you can embrace media, and I really want to talk about this. This is like so important. Embrace media as a tool for your benefit to assist in getting the word out. The media, you'd be amazed how many people, I don't think it's so prevalent in this room today, but there are people who, when you say media, they go, oh, media. As if, A, it's some bad thing, or, God forbid, those people who want to make money. Media is your friend. Be part of it. Use it.
Right. And there's this feeling that creating media can be difficult. And, you know, sure, freedom of the press was often limited to those who owned one, A.J. Liebling. And then freedom of the press belongs to those who own the servers. At this point in the internet age, from Ernie the Attorney, it's a great quote. And then I have once said, freedom of the press belongs to those who can compile one, and you can quote me on that. And in fact, I quote me on that. And then my friend said, we're starting a real revolutionary vanguard, struggling to compile a little liberty. This is when my friend Mitch and I, and our friend Peter, who was a professional broadcast journalist before, actually still is, created something called correspondences.org. And we said, we're going to put up a weblog in the early days when it was really technically challenging to do so. And we're going to give anyone who asks for it an account. And then we're going to let them publish whatever they want. And then they're going to be responsible for owning their own words, and people are going to talk about it. Well, a bunch of people said, you guys are nuts. You're going to get sued. People are going to put stuff up. There's going to be libels. We never got sued. We became an official Google News source. When Google News first started, we actually were feeding them stories. We had stuff published. We had 3 people writing for us who were professional broadcast journalists writing under pseudonyms because they were committed to their networks and they weren't allowed to publish in other media. So they were writing about stuff that they knew about things that happened behind the scenes of the news that they couldn't do legally in the press, so they were doing it pseudonymously. And I still can't tell you who they are. 2 of them I don't know. One of them I know who they are, and they were a big deal, but I can't tell you. So you have to trust me on that, but what I'll say is we gave an outlet to people. And we had a lot of people. We had a guy for the Medicinal Marijuana Coalition talking all about how it was helping all these different people, and the media wasn't covering his stories. Now, I'm not going to take a position for or against this or that. What I'll say is he got out stories that people hadn't seen before because we had made that available to him.
A new kind of contact.
Yes, exactly. A little media can go a long way. Sometimes it's best practices, and best practices can be difficult to share. So one of the things we want to do with the Better World Network is to show people how we can create media very easily, pass that information along. The vision is basically be a central hub from which people can tell their stories and share them. Record it on a video, record it on an audio message, and get some distributed volunteers who can take this stuff, not necessarily edit it for content, but edit it to make sure that it's in a format that you can hear. There maybe needs to be some language translation on certain of these things, or closed captioning provided for accessibility in certain things. But for the most part, taking what's created by people, maybe at workshops or stories or in villages, whatever, and redistributing it so that it's available to anybody. And using things like licenses like the Creative Commons license, which is similar to copyright. It's an extension of copyright. It's a revisioning of copyright. It says some rights reserved. So you can use this as long as you don't use it for commercial use. You can take it, mix it, mash it up, as long as you attribute it to me. So you can say this section came from Howard and this section came from Dean. You can use it, and I'm not going to sue you for copyright violation if I see it in something else. Well, that opens up a whole new world. I mean, if I was, taping Darlene's story, does she really need that copyrighted and owned? I get the sense probably not. But You know, so would you be upset if someone put that in a group of stories about do something moments? Probably not. So put the rights out there that says you have the right to do that. Make it explicit. Then it's available to people. Then it starts moving around. Then it can be moved around. And it avoids some of the potential legal restrictions that the big media has on content.
And if you're concerned about attribution, which is often a concern, people may feel, I don't want to get paid, but I certainly want them to know that I created this. There's something called a derivative license in Creative Commons, so that if you use what Joe Blow wrote, all that's really required is to say, Joe Blow wrote this. So in effect, you grant Joe Blow ownership or creation of the content, but you still have full use and magnitude of the content.
Right. So you want to go through what is social media? Or?
Well, social media, it's a term no one uses, and it's really never going to happen. All right, the online tools and platforms is what Wikipedia says. Wikipedia, by the way, is social media. The online tools and platforms that people use to share opinions, insights, experience, and perspectives with each other. Social media can take many different forms, and that's crucial to understand, including text, images, audio, and video. Popular social media include blogs, message boards, podcasts, wikis, vlogs, which are video weblogs, any number of things. Now, Howard, since you wrote this, and I love the way you wrote this, actually you took part of this from Wikipedia, but Howard does this one well.
Okay. Podcasting is a portmanteau, which actually is a made-up word, and it comes from reference to the Apple iPod, but it also comes from the reference of broadcasting. And it's the idea that an internet feed that can be downloaded individually or subscribed to, so you get it every time it comes out. And is usually done in a format that many people can view or listen to, like MP3 or QuickTime video, et cetera. It's a really powerful, podcasts are a really powerful form of social media. And by the way, slides, we'll make the slides available under Creative Commons license, so everyone can have them. Podcasts are really, it's your own radio station. And a lot of people think, well, gee, if a radio station, I must need a microphone and a mixer and need some compressor stuff to make my voice sound good. No, you need a cell phone. And unfortunately, we don't have an internet connection here, because I would do the 1 minute podcast demo, which is I pick up my cell phone, I call a number in California, I record something like I'm calling a voicemail, I hit pound, I hang up, and it's on a web page when I click the web browser. It takes exactly 4 minutes to set up that account, and it takes exactly, maybe 30 seconds to place it on a web page when you're done with it. So there is zero barrier. There should be zero barrier. If you can leave a voicemail message on someone's telephone, you can have a podcast. And I have to give credit to the service that makes that telephone version available. It's Odeo, odeo.com. Evan Williams, who's one of the founders of Odeo, is also one of the founders of Blogger, which was one of the original web blogging services. And Evan's brilliant and wonderful and very nice, and has put this out. And if you want a lot of storage space, you want to have a lot of podcasts, I think there's some sort of a subscription fee. But if you want to just put up one or two or a couple, it's trivial. It's nothing. There's no cost. The cost is your time and effort. And if you do it well, if you can record a good story, you can be well received and well listened to. And there are a lot of podcasts out now that have hundreds of thousands of listeners. Some of them are much more professionally produced at this point. They're usually not a cell phone thing, but there is a guy, I know one particular one's called Trucker Tom. Trucker Tom is a coast-to-coast trucker. He has put a microphone in the cab of his truck, and when he's on these long truck runs, he talks to the people. And he plays a lot of country music and other kinds of music that's considered, quote, PodSafe. And this is another company, it's called PodShow. They've put out a bunch of music, or they've allowed artists to put out their music and give it a particular license. And the license is called a PodSafe license. And what that means is allowed to be distributed in a podcast and downloaded on MP3. Typically, music that you buy in the CD store, you can't just put it on a podcast because you run afoul of 6 or 8 different rights agencies and you find yourself sued. These are typically independent bands and independent artists who've given this set of rights based on an attribution license, saying if I was playing the Dean Band, I would have to say You just listened to the Dean Band, and you can get their music at deanband.com and check it out or whatever, and .net, right, exactly. So PodSafe music is really quite an interesting revolution, and it's an interesting route around the traditional rights agencies. You can find any kind of music, and I do mean any kind, from tribal to classical to electronica to pop to rock to whatever you like, emo. It's out there, and there are people who want to give it away so that they get more exposure from your podcast. So you can make it really interesting. You can give yourself a theme song. I give a theme song for my podcast. It's written by some guy in Iceland I've never met, but I thank him every time for creating this music and giving it away so I can have a theme song for my, it's an instrumental, so I have a theme song for my podcast. So it's a really powerful way to create media and get it out. And I do a podcast for my friends, right? So maybe 10 people, 15 people listen to it, that's fine, right? But I don't have a chance to call them all every week. But if they listen, they hear what's going on in my life. They may hear about a social issue. They may hear about something that happened to me on the train. And they probably will hear a song that they've never heard before, and hopefully they'll like it. I found 5 or 6 New York bands that I like now that I didn't know about 5 or 6 weeks ago, because I find something new every week that hopefully some people have gone out and bought the albums from. I know I've bought some music. So that's sort of the power of this. I know Tom wanted us to keep it limited. Do you want to say some more things? Did I go too fast on that? I get a little passionate.
I do want to point out just another thing, a crucial point about PodSafe music, and this is a minor little legal detail so you don't get in trouble. Right. Always date your podcast or give it an RSS feed that captures the initial date, because there is PodSafe music that stops being safe. What happens is Groovy Band puts out PodSafe music, and it's wonderful, and people really like it. So many people like it that big, large record company comes and seizes all the rights, and it's no longer safe. If you recorded your podcast before big, bad music company came and claimed everything, then you're okay. If you don't claim that time, you're actually in this you're in this strange area of suability. It's just a strange place. But look up, if you go to podsafemusic.com, if you also just look up PodSafe on the web, on Google, you'll find a ton of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out. Also, do not take your own version, you playing the guitar, you playing the piano or the organ or whatever, of some song, because somebody owns a zillion different levels of rights to that song. You can't use it unless you've gotten there's a mechanical license, there's a publishing license, there's a number of other things. You'd be amazed how many licenses there are for established pieces of music. You got to know everything's in the public domain. Happy Birthday is in the public domain, I believe.
No, it's not. No, it's not. You need a license.
Happy Birthday is not. And there's some Irving Berlin tune that is, and Happy Birthday, which I think he gets credit for, is not.
Can you do a cover of a PodSafe song?
If you have the rights to.
You'd have to, yeah. Can you do your own cover of PodSafe? You would have to actually get a license to do that from whoever wrote the song, right. Unless they Creative Commons it to a completely open license.
Okay. I want to throw out one thing. Podcasting is a misnomer in the sense that you do not need an iPod. So I'm going to look right at the camera. You do not need an iPod to get a podcast. In fact, you may not even need a computer. There are some of the new hip Nokia phones and some of the more technologically advanced Windows and Palm phones and stuff like that. You can just download, mostly they're MP3 files. You can just download them right to those things. You can listen to it on the computer screen by clicking on it in a web browser and just listen to it. iTunes, which is Apple's music program, which is usable on the PC and the Mac and is free, has a whole way of searching for podcasts in the Apple Music Store, finding them and putting them into a list like this that refreshes every day. Every time you turn on the program, it says, hey, is there any new episodes? And if there are, it downloads them. If you don't like iTunes or you have a problem with Apple or it's not your thing, there's an open source client called Juice. And it helps you squeeze the juice out of the apple. It's Java, so it runs on Linux and Mac and Windows and whatever, and There's actually a version of it now that's coming out for some of the smartphones, whatever. So there's lots and lots of ways of getting this media. So it means there's lots of ways for you to get it out there.